5 practical tips for stunning landscape and travel photography, then this video is for you. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Stanton, and for those who don't know me, I've been into photography for more than 10 years now, and I've had the privilege to travel around the world shooting what I love, which is travel and landscape photography. Now, over the years, I've learned many practical tips and tricks which I hope can help elevate your photography game to the next level. And without further ado, let's get started. Now, tip number 1, timing is everything. Now, I cannot emphasize how important this is, but it is the one and greatest tip that you can take home from this video today. Remember that timing dictates everything. It dictates the light, and light dictates the scene. So the quality and the direction of natural light can dramatically impact the mood, the contrast, and the overall appearance of a landscape. And as photographers, we often want to capture what is famously known as the golden hour. The golden hour refers to the first and the last hours of daylight where the sunlight is softer and warmer. So when is exactly golden hour? Remember, this time can change depending where you are in the world and what season. The easiest way to do so is just to Google when is sunrise and sunset, plus or minus 30 minutes to an hour. That's usually golden hour during sunrise and sunset. Now, the great thing about golden hour is that the light is often softer and warmer. The scene can be dynamic, it's changing, which means that it creates more dramatic shadows and highlights and colors in the landscape. It also means that within that time period, you can get a variety of shots within a limited time frame. So it makes photography very efficient within that short time window. Unlike all the times of the day where the light is usually quite harsh and quite homogeneous. In fact, when I travel, I actually do 80% of my photography in that golden hour, and personally I really like the pre and post sunrise timing. Now, the difference between sunrise and sunset for me is that during the sunrise hours, there's usually a lot less tourists, which also means it can allow you to take photos with a lot less people in the scenes. Now, I know some people can do amazing post-processing and remove a crowd of people, but personally, I don't have the time and I don't have the skill for such advanced photography. So for me, getting the photo right in camera is extremely important. So practically speaking, how do I do that? Usually when I travel, I actually arrive to a scene maybe 1 hour before sunrise, because it gives me time to explore the area before sunrise. And though it often means waking up at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, but by doing so, you actually capture a variety of scenes in a very short period of time, and it allows you to avoid the crowds, avoid the large tour buses, and it makes photography much easier. By the time the first visitors and crowds start coming, I'm already off to go back to my hotel for my breakfast. So here are some sample shots of how I would not otherwise be able to capture the photo if I was there late, because there are scenes usually filled with lots and lots of tourists. Now, tip number 2 is to explore different perspectives. Now, if you just take your camera to your eye and shoot, your photos will end up looking like everyone else's photos. Now, the difference between how we see the world and how photos are composed is that we see things naturally in 3 dimensions, whereas photos are 2 dimensions. So it does require a creative eye to create a sense of dimension, a sense of distance, and scale within our photos. Now, there are many different ways you can use to create interesting and different perspectives. For example, you can get low, and instead of always shooting from eye level, this creates a more dramatic and immersive feel, and try to incorporate foreground elements like flowers, rocks, or grass, and this will create a sense of distance within your photos. Going high to a higher vantage point also has its advantage. For example, hills or cliffs or towers or or skyscrapers because it can allow you to create different patterns and textures that you can't create from the ground level. Now, some simple practical tips is, for example, to include leading lines in your photos. They can be natural or they can be man-made. For example, roads, rivers, and fences or pathways that can help draw and lead the viewer's eye into the frame and to create a sense of dimension. Now, tip number 3 is something I learned the hard way, which is to pack light. Now, 5 to 8 years ago, I used to be the guy who brought 15 to 20 kilograms of camera gear during my travels. I had 2 DSLR bodies, 5 to 6 lenses, a laptop, and a tripod, and amongst many other things. And these lenses would often include the Holy Trinity 2.8 zooms and the prime lenses, and I thought that was the key to getting great photos. But little did I realize how much it was actually impacting my photography experience as well as my opportunities. How so? Because I was carrying so much gear, I was walking less, and this also means that I was giving up more easily during hikes and tours, and it actually just detracted from the overall experience. Moreover, when I approached the scene, I was too distracted on thinking what gear to shoot with. Should I use the 24-70, 7200, or the 105, the 90? And so it really affected how I composed my shots. And actually that turned out to be quite detrimental because my mind was preoccupied with too many different things. Remember, a good photographer can produce stunning photos even with just one lens. Many of the famous photographers that we know, especially those back in the days, just shot with one focal length, whether it be at 24, 35, 50, or 75mm. Especially nowadays with how advanced cameras and lenses are nowadays, a decent zoom and a tripod will get you a very long way. So nowadays I've learned to sort of give up a little bit in terms of the weight and the aperture, but with how good cameras are nowadays, even those that are 5 or 10 years old, you can capture absolutely stunning photos. Now, tip number 4 is to be spontaneous and embrace flexibility. Now, before you reach a place when you've traveled, you've probably done lots and lots of research online on forums, travel guides, YouTube, Instagram, you name it. You've probably had your day trips planned out to the hour or even to the minute. But when I travel, I think it does pay off to allow for some flexibility and spontaneity in your trip because better opportunities may present itself out of nowhere. Now, the single hardest thing to predict is, for example, the weather. So oftentimes when I travel to a place, I actually want to give myself 2 to 3 nights in one place, so it allows me to juggle my itinerary here and there depending on what I'm doing, what I'm shooting, and this just ensures that if there's one place I really want to visit, I really give myself the maximum opportunity to do so. Now, one good example is when I traveled to Machu Picchu a few years ago, and I stayed there for 3 nights, and all I did was shoot at the peak. Now, a lot of online research said that you could just do it in one day, but I actually had 2 days of bad weather. But on the 3rd morning, when I reached the peak, I had this one clear blue sky view of Machu Picchu, and I knew that all that waiting was finally worth it. Another important thing is to really engage with the locals, because no one will really know the place as good as the locals. I mean, you can read as much as you want on Lonely Planet or TripAdvisor, but these guys have practically grown up there and lived there all their lives, and they will offer you something different than travel books can. So do pay an effort to engage with the locals. One thing that I do like to do is actually to join some walking tours, and these walking tours are sometimes organized by big companies, but I think it's a good introduction to a city, and often they will have good contacts or guides that you can reach out to further enrich your experience. Now, Another important thing to embrace a travel plan like this is to really be flexible with your bookings, such as your hotels and your flights. So I do try to book through websites or hotels that accept flexible cancellations, even if it pays a little bit more, because you might eventually lose even more if you cancel your reservations. Now, the last and final important tip is to really try and tell a story. Remember that effective travel photography is not just about capturing beautiful single standalone images. It's about using your photographs to share the experience of your journey and to transport your viewer and immerse them in a particular time, place, and culture. Now, to think of it in a practical way, I like to think of it like a storytelling sort of mindset. Usually you start with creating the background, which may often be creating a more holistic image about where you are, and often this is accompanied by a narrative. So to do so, the easiest way is to capture a variety of shots. So for example, you can start with a wide establishing shot and then some mid-range scenes into some close-up details, and this provides context and characters and an emotional connection. Practically how I do that is because I like to shoot early in the morning when there's less people, I usually start all my photography with wide angle lenses, and then as the crowd starts to come in and the light starts to get a bit harsh, then I tend to focus more on, let's say, mid-range and details, and so it gives me a very clear framework of how I want to create the story. So remember to value range over aperture when it comes to travel photography. The next thing is really try and document the everyday. I think in addition to all the iconic landmarks and dramatic moments, pay attention to the small elements that give the place a sense of life and identity. These little sort of slice of life images can be very powerful storytelling tools, and they are sometimes the most memorable photos that I take. So try and take photos of the people, because the place is made of both the architecture but more importantly the people as well. To do so, try and really highlight the human connections, include people in your photographs. You try and capture genuine interactions, expressions, and moments of cultural exchange, but obviously do so with a considerate mindset, because not all cultures are open to allowing their photos to be taken. Now, the last practical tip in regards to telling the story is to be consistent in the way you edit the photos. So for example, I tend to use 1 or 2 presets for most of my photos. Try not to jump back and forth between too many different editing styles, because it can seem a bit incongruent and out of style. Now, the last thing to do when telling the story is to really edit and sequence your photos thoughtfully. The way your audience will perceive your story is how you present it. So how you choose to display them on social media or on a website and things like that really requires you to selecting the photos in the right order and presenting your final images, and that is how the viewers are able to know how your story was created. So do experiment with different sequencing and pacing to see what creates the most impactful photos and story for telling. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned some practical tips for your travel photography. What tips do you guys have to share? I'll be happy to learn down in the comment section below. And don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for future video tips to improve your photography. Until next time.